Greek civilization, the Teotihuacanos, considered well-known progenitors of civilizations, yet many would be surprised that native Southern California also had a progenitor culture that influenced the societies and cultures of the area up to the arrival of the Europeans, and even predated the cultures mentioned. These people's artifacts have been turning up for over a century on the coast, plowed up or even today discovered by the rise of housing development in the area. Therefore, they have been studied for over a century. Though reaching many conclusions as to what the Millingstone Horizon was, and now being seen as many different complexes rather than a gigantic homogeneous culture, characteristics that are agreed upon by all is that they were a people who lived off the sea and used millingstones, hence the name, to grind all kinds of foods. The first evidence of the Millingstone Horizon appears in the archaeological record in 6500 BC. This was found through permanent settlements replacing hunter-gatherer cultures in Southern California. One of the earliest sites found belonging to them is the Brown site in Ventura County, which contains a cemetery. This was made up of 14 burials, not arranged in any sort of position, and their remains had already been scattered about to make any sort of assumptions. The bodies had very little grave goods. In the whole site were found 3 rock crystals and 6 shark teeth. Some of the Millingstones were ceremonially killed, meaning they were broken or drilled so they could not be used again and accompany the dead. There were some monos found as well. Hundreds of cobbles were found, some in a circular mound pattern, probably used to support baskets and other objects. With this early site is seen the beginnings of the Millingstone Horizon, also called the Encinitas tradition in more recent papers, to add to the confusing nomenclature. It is further subdivided into more traditions. We will look at 3 of these, beginning with the Topanga complex, the La Jolla complex, and then its inland variant in the Grieve Knoll tradition. There is also the Bauma complex that was contemporary with these traditions, yet they are a sort of archaeological mystery, as they share features of the San Dieguito complex when they first appear in the archaeological record, and they also appear to have survived the Takic expansion. The Bauma complex is deserving of its own film. The Topanga complex, centered in Santa Barbara, Ventura, and Los Angeles counties, south into northern Orange County and Bolsa Chica. The first phase of the Topanga complex was characterized by an abundant use of metates and monos, some of which were laid into cairns on top of burials. Many sites are coastal, yet there are also many Phase 1 Topanga sites in the Santa Monica Mountains. Many lithics are found, lanceolate, and large cyanotched, even some made out of obsidian, meaning that there was a trade for the stone going on at this time. Scraper planes, an artifact endemic to Millingstone Horizon traditions, are also found in these sites. Based on their artifacts, it has been inferred they lived a similar hunter-gatherer lifestyle to the San Dieguito complex that preceded them. Most important of all, in regards to their beliefs, they made cogstones. One of the greatest archaeological discoveries on the coast of Southern California was found here. A cache of cogstones and other artifacts at a site known as CAORA 83, the Keystone Cache. When one thinks of great archaeological discoveries in the Americas, the Lord of Sipan may come to mind in Peru, the Adena Blade caches that appear in the Midwest, or the Lovelock Cave caches of paleo-native organic materials. Yet many would be surprised that Southern California has its own great archaeological discovery, CAORA 83, also known as the Keystone Cache, or for the sake of this film, the Cogstone Cache, the largest cache of cogstones ever found, numbering at 17. This important discovery helps in the understanding of what is known as the Millingstone Horizon culture and their beliefs. Bolsa Chica in Southern California. This area has always been continuously inhabited due to its freshwater springs and abundance in game. For the people here, it was paradise. 8,000 years of uninterrupted habitation. There is evidence of a bead-making industry beginning in 9000 BC that transitioned into using Olivella snail shells for beads and pigment for tattoos. A kit for this use found in a woman's burial. 2,000 beads were also found. Yet the focus of this film, CAOR 83, located on a mesa in Bolsa Chica, was discovered in 2006. This area contained a cemetery, beginning to be used in 5550 BC, and cogstones beginning to be cached at this time. Attributed to the Millingstone Horizon, it was in continuous use for 3,000 years, approximately around 4000 to 3000 BC. Many religious talismans were cached. These include charm stones, rattlesnake talismans, an incised tablet pendant, a donut stone, lithic spheroids, a painted rock, a quote-unquote singing rock, and many discodials. Notable human burials include 4 women with filed teeth. Included in the site were shallow dance areas with a post hole in the middle alongside structures that are believed to have been used to prepare the dead alongside being used to store ceremonial objects. After this time period, CAOR 83 stopped yielding artifacts. By this point, it was believed to have been used only as a retreat center. 15 years after the discovery of CaORA-83 in 2006, the Keystone or Cogstone cache was found. It consisted of 17 cogstones and a mono. Considered the largest cache of these artifacts discovered. They were found packed in mud, a surprise to the archaeologists excavating. It turns out it was deliberate by the people who interred them. What was also noticed was that unlike the discoids, the cogstones were repaired, meaning the creators took great care of them, filling in cracks with asphaltum. 5 types of cogstones were classified: trapezoidal, sometimes grooved, jello mold with faint grooves, bowls that have no groove and has a pit, top knot or spool, looking like a thread spool with no grooves, and the rectangular cogstone, the most familiar. Its grooves give the appearance of a cogwheel. Meanwhile, from this site south of Bolsa Chica, up to the US-Mexican border, was the La Jolla complex. Now, it's not a coincidence the limits of the culture ends here. There is very little research on how far the Millingstone horizon extended in Baja California, save for 1 or 2 footnotes of an artifact at a site found that resembles that of the culture. La Jolla complex sites are notable for their shell middens, which older archaeological papers gave them the name, the shell midden people. Other types of faunal remains are rare. Yet this is not the case in the Ballast Point site, which has remains of sea mammals and fish in its middens. Their diet consisted, it seems, of mostly shellfish and plant materials. Their sites are located on ancient coastal lagoons and coastal terraces. It is also more than likely that there are some sites from this culture that are inundated. As to the origin of these peoples of the La Jolla Complex 1, there exist 2 theories. The first is that these peoples migrated before 5500 BC from the deserts when they became drier. The other, as was explored in the previous film on the San Dieguito complex, was that they came from the north, as there is an overlap between the 2 cultures in the archaeological record, with the La Jolla complex ending up replacing the San Dieguito complex. With no cogstone production, the artifacts found at La Jolla 1 sites consist of Pinto Basin points and other lithics, as well as those made of calco and obsidian butte obsidian, showing the trade of the material went back that long ago. Now going inland, there is the Grieven Knoll tradition, centered in the San Bernardino and Riverside areas, east of the Santa Ana Mountains. Their artifacts during the Grieven Knoll 1 era are dominated by monos and metates, and a lack of mortars or pestles. They also had large star points, which include pinto points as well as core tools. The burial traditions of these peoples consisted of the flexed inhumations of other Millingstone traditions, but there have also been found cremations. In the Prado Basin by Corona, there has been found another cache of artifacts, known as the Cogstone Point site, which yielded, as its name suggests, an unknown number of cogstones, monos and metates, a pinto point, and supposedly a stone ball. There is also a concentration of Grieven Knoll 1 sites around Lake Elsinore, yielding many mono and metate caches, lithics, and the scattered remains of an individual. Something that is important to note is the presence of ceramics, the oldest found in all of California, dating back to 5700 BC. They consist of vessel and figurine fragments. More research is required to interpret the ceramics and their context in Grieven Knoll 1 sites. It was noted by archaeologists that these peoples held out longer in not using mortars and pestles, sticking to using monos and metates, unlike the Millingstone traditions of the coast. This has led to a belief that the Grieven Knoll peoples originated from the desert and moved west based on a reliance on the metate and mono. Before we enter the second and last intact phase of the Millingstone horizon, we will look at 2 artifacts that are unique and important to the peoples of these cultures: the cogstone and the scraper plane. As mentioned, the cogstones are mostly explained as part of a religious context. They are in production from 6500 to 3500 BC. They are viewed as the Millingstone horizon's equivalent of the charm stones of the interior of California. One author of a paper hypothesizes that by the type and number of cogs on the stone, which never number more than 22, every type played a different role. For example, cogstones with 5 to 18 grooves could have been used in the manufacture of rope or fishing line. Those that are mortar-shaped were even believed to have been used as oil lamps, but no evidence of any residues exist. Another popular theory is that they were weapons, the heads of clubs, yet the cogstones that have holes, if mounted to sticks, would have been too ineffective to be used as weapons. Therefore, the theory that they were religious objects seems to be the most probable, as the paper ends up concluding. The next object endemic to the Millingstone horizon is the scraper plane, made from large flakes from cores. They are found inland, and were still in use by the natives of San Diego in yucca processing, which is theorized what they were used for in inland Millingstone contexts. In around 3000 BC, a change occurred, mostly on the coast. The lagoons inhabited by the La Jolla complex peoples began to silt up, and both the La Jolla and Topanga peoples changed in burial customs. This was the second phase of the Millingstone horizon. To begin with the La Jolla complex, some changes noted in the now La Jolla 2 sites as mentioned was the change in burial customs. They now appeared, quote, more segregated, and true cemeteries were formed marked with one or more inverted metates, unquote. There was also an increase in lithic production. Of course, most of the lithics created being scraper plains. These peoples lived in a time that was bountiful and resource rich. Their diet, which as mentioned, consisted of mostly shellfish, diversified. Plant materials and terrestrial mammals were included in their diet, and they incorporated the morin and pestle alongside the monometate. Up north in Topanga 2 sites, the people still kept on creating many ceremonial artifacts such as charm stones, discodials, and cogstones. Just like the La Jolla 2 peoples, there was an increase in the production of lithic materials. In this case, scrapers and core tools as well as projectile points. A very interesting discovery in regards to cogstones found near the Santana River, especially in the drainage at Bolsa Chica in Orange County, is that the peoples of Topanga 2 were scavenging cogstones from Topanga 1 site and reusing them. Some interesting artifacts from this period also include incised stones. As mentioned in the introduction of the Topanga 2 phase, their burial practices also changed. At the Zuma Mesa site located at Zuma Creek, many of the previously mentioned ceremonial artifacts were found. The burials found here were in many positions, flex and extended inhumations, and reburials. Some of the bodies were buried under cairns made of hundreds of broken tools, or with one or two metates placed above them. At another site in Paradise Cove, it was literally paved with millingstones, under which there were inhumations. An interesting detail in regards to the beliefs of these peoples is the metates of Porter Ranch, many of them ritually killed. This meaning the bottom of the depression was knocked out so it couldn't be used again, yet there were no human remains found at the site, which is very strange as in other archaeological contexts and even in sites of the historical tribes of Southern California, killed wares were buried with their owners. Back to Topanga 2 in Orange County, they seemed to have been doing well, expanding settlements and taking advantage of new habitats such as kelp beds and estuaries from resources now that the sea levels were stabilizing in around 4000 to 3000 BC. They still made cogstones as well as plummet-shaped charm stones. Now in Topanga 2 sites were found artifacts that connected them to the Great Basin. These include large biface blades, olivella grooved beads, and lozenge stones. Yet the second and last phase of the Millingstone Horizon would end with the arrival of new people, the Takic speakers. The last part of this film will look at the last holdouts of the Millingstone Horizon. By 1500 BC, a new people entered into Southern California, the Takic speakers. Theorized to have originated from the southern Central Valley. They are from the Shoshonean branch of the Uto-Aztecan language family. More research is needed as to why they expanded into Southern California. Theories ranging from the silting up of coastal sites, little rainfall and climate change leading to food shortages, known as the coastal decline model. The Takic speakers could have entered into Southern California that was sparsely populated, yet this is a topic that deserves its own video, and will be the next segue into the history of Southern California series. While the Grievenol experienced little changes because of the Takic expansions, they were cut off from the Millingstone peoples on the coast. It is believed the Grievenol peoples adopted Takic languages by 1000 AD. As for the La Jolla peoples, the lands they inhabited were replaced by Takic speakers. This is the same for the Topanga peoples as well. Takic peoples taking over the coastal areas they inhabited. Yet the Topanga people had few holdouts in the Santa Monica Mountains, known as Topanga 3. They are said to represent a relic Topanga 2 population. They buried their peoples oriented south and included abalone in their burials. They still continued their lifestyle uninterrupted. They held out until 0 AD, probably replaced by the ancestors of the Tongva or Chumash. In regards to the latter tribe, there have been many theories that the Millingstone Horizon peoples were the ancestors of the Chumash, due to similar artifacts, yet this is not the case. The supposed predecessors of the Chumash were the Campbell tradition, yet there isn't much information on them. Another question is, what was happening on the Channel Islands during the extent of the Millingstone Horizon period? Many archaeologists believe that each island was an isolated and independent polity, with only the northern islands having limited contact with the coast at most. Only St. Clemente Island has a few artifacts that resemble those of the Millingstone Horizon. Although they were reliant on the sea, they were not seafaring. It isn't until 1200 BC, which coincides with the arrival of the Takic speakers, a people resembling the Chumash appear on the northern Channel Islands. As has been stressed in previous films, and even the introduction of this one, the Millingstone Horizon is the most influential culture in the history of Southern California. Although the peoples who followed after them brought their own societal structures and beliefs, the lifestyle and sites of the Millingstone Horizon would help these peoples adapt to this new environment, and in a way, aspects of the Millingstone Horizon would survive in how the historical tribes of coastal Southern California lived, even after the arrival of the Europeans.